Law enforcement officials across America are turning against Trump's ICE operations, and sources suggest this rebellion from sheriffs and police chiefs might represent collapse of administration's claim that federal immigration enforcement has local support. We're not talking about progressive activists or Democratic politicians criticizing ICE tactics. We're talking about reports that Minneapolis Police Chief Brian O'Hara publicly warned his own officers they risk losing jobs if they don't intervene when federal agents use unlawful force.
So since Donald Trump, quote unquote, took down the temperature, an ICE agent on video threatening, you raise your voice, I erase your voice. You have agents trying to get into the Ecuadorian embassy because they think they can round up some illegals there. That's illegal based on international law. Told by someone who works at the consulate, back up. He says, if you touch me, I'll grab you.
That Maine Sheriff Kevin Joyce called ICE tactics Bush League policing after they detained his corrections officer recruit who passed all background checks. That police chiefs from Minneapolis to Portland are telling communities to call 911 if they see masked people who might be ICE agents, because residents can't tell difference between federal enforcement and potential kidnapping. And what might make this moment so significant is even Fox News is turning against Trump on immigration. When county sheriffs say ICE operations are too heavy-handed, when police chiefs warn their officers have duty to stop federal agents from using excessive force, when conservative outlets question whether strategy is actually good for America, sources suggest that's not messaging problem. That could be complete breakdown of Trump's law and order narrative when those who swore oath to uphold law are publicly calling out ICE conduct as unprofessional, chaotic, and unconstitutional.
We're being told one story, which is totally different than what's occurring or what occurred last night.
It's very untrained, it looks unprofessional, it looks very chaotic. It doesn't look like there's clear teamwork tactically to achieve the same objective.
But before we break down most devastating law enforcement rebukes and why Trump might be giving Kristi Noem cold shoulder over this disaster, real quick, you cannot trust mainstream media to explain significance of sheriffs and chiefs publicly opposing federal immigration tactics they claim violate civil rights. That's why we built John Brown Show, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want analysis that actually connects local law enforcement rebellion to Trump's panic and strategy revamp, hit that subscribe button right now. All right, let's get into what law enforcement is actually saying and why sources suggest this represents devastating blow to Trump's entire immigration narrative. Because think about administration's messaging. Trump constantly describes ICE as professional and disciplined. He claims local authorities support operations. He presents federal presence as restoring order in communities. But when Minneapolis Police Chief warns officers they must intervene to prevent excessive force by federal partners, when Maine Sheriff calls leaving detained man's car unsecured with windows down Bush League policing, when chiefs tell residents to report masked people who might be ICE because they look like kidnappers, that narrative collapses. Reports indicate these aren't progressive politicians making political attacks. These are law enforcement professionals who understand tactics, who know constitutional policing, who have duty to protect civil rights. And they're saying ICE operations are too aggressive, poorly coordinated, lacking proper training, and violating rights of citizens. When people who actually swore oath to uphold law and order say federal agents are operating unlawfully, sources suggest that's not partisan criticism. That might be professional assessment from experts recognizing operations have gone too far and need to be reined in before situation becomes more dangerous. Let's start with Minneapolis Police Chief Brian O'Hara's unprecedented warning, because sources suggest this represents most direct rebuke from top local law enforcement. O'Hara publicly warned his own officers that if they don't intervene when federal ICE agents use unlawful force, they risk losing their jobs. Think about significance of that statement. Reports indicate local police chief is telling his officers they have duty to step in to prevent excessive force by federal partners. That's striking rebuke from top police officer and city under strain. It marks rare moment where local law enforcement openly calls out conduct of Trump's federal immigration agents rather than backing them. And there's specific guidance O'Hara gave to community. Sources suggest he told residents, if you see masked people and you're not sure if they're law enforcement, You should call 911 and provide as much information as possible. He reminded community that very recently they had tragedy in state by someone purporting to be law enforcement. Reports indicate he made clear that anyone uncertain whether they're witnessing kidnapping versus legitimate enforcement should report it immediately, and police will document whether someone's unsure if there's law enforcement present. That guidance reveals how chaotic and unprofessional ICE operations have become when police chief has to tell residents they might not be able to distinguish federal agents from criminals. Think about what O'Hara detailed regarding complaints. Sources suggest law enforcement community has received endless complaints about civil rights violations in streets from U.S. citizens over past 2 weeks. People being stopped in traffic or on street with no cause and forced to provide paperwork determining if they're here legally. Reports indicate then police officers started experiencing same treatment while off duty. Every individual who had this happen was person of color. One Brooklyn Park officer who shared her story was stopped as she passed ICE going down roadway. When they boxed her in demanding paperwork, she became concerned about rhetoric and treatment. She pulled out phone to record incident, and sources suggest phone was knocked out of her hands, preventing her from recording. And there's assessment from law enforcement experts about tactics. Reports indicate they describe ICE operations as looking very untrained, unprofessional, and chaotic. They say it doesn't look like there's clear teamwork tactically to achieve same objective. Sources suggest this contradicts everything Trump claims about professional disciplined enforcement. When local police chief has to warn his officers they must intervene to stop federal agents from violating rights, when off-duty officers of color get detained and prevented from recording incidents, when experts say tactics look untrained and chaotic, that's not restoring order. That might be creating chaos and danger while violating constitutional rights systematically. But let's examine Maine Sheriff Kevin Joyce's criticism, because sources suggest it reveals how ICE operations violate basic policing standards, even in situations where they claim they're targeting criminals. In Portland, federal agents swarmed and detained man in his car. DHS claimed he was here illegally, but man said he's corrections officer, and Sheriff Joyce confirmed it, explaining officer is legally allowed to work in United States through 2029. Reports indicate sheriff is furious at how this went down. Think about specific details Joyce highlighted. Sources suggest witness who videotaped encounter said in 3 minutes, agents pulled guy from car, handcuffed him, put him in their vehicle, then all took off, leaving his car with windows down, lights on, unsecured and unoccupied right on side of street. Joyce called that Bush League policing. When asked about DHS statement claiming lawbreaker being employed as corrections officer is shocking, reports indicate Joyce explained his employee applied, had I-9 giving him right to work in Maine. County HR department verified he was legal to work there. They vetted him. He took polygraph. He did not commit any crimes whatsoever. And there's what this reveals about ICE operations. Sources suggest they're not just targeting violent criminals as claimed. They're detaining corrections officers who passed all background checks and have legal right to work. They're leaving vehicles unsecured, creating public safety hazards. They're operating in ways that local sheriffs call unprofessional and Bush League. Reports indicate Joyce referenced meeting year ago where he and 100 other sheriffs listened to Tom Homan explain process would be locking down borders and getting criminal illegal aliens off streets. Joyce said he couldn't disagree with that mission. But what they're seeing now with his corrections officer contradicts everything Homan promised. When actual law enforcement professionals call your tactics Bush League, sources suggest that's damning professional assessment that operations lack basic competence. Share this video with everyone you know because there's broader pattern. From county sheriffs to police chiefs, growing body of law enforcement voices saying same thing. ICE operations are going too far. They're too heavy-handed and aggressive. They're not coordinating well with local policing. Reports indicate Minneapolis, where countless local police unions and chiefs said federal agents basically lack proper crowd control management and training. And it only makes situation on ground more dangerous. When people whose job is professional law enforcement say federal agents lack training and create danger, sources suggest that's not political opinion. That might be expert assessment recognizing operations violate standards that protect both officers and communities. But step back and consider systematic nature of violations law enforcement is documenting, because sources suggest this goes far beyond isolated incidents. O'Hara detailed receiving endless complaints about civil rights violations over a 2-week period. Reports indicate people being stopped with no cause, forced to provide paperwork, prevented from recording when they try to document incidents. Off-duty police officers experiencing same treatment. Every victim person of color. That's not legitimate enforcement. That might be racial profiling and constitutional violations happening systematically. Think about what Sheriff Joyce highlighted about process. Sources suggest his corrections officer had legal I-9, passed background checks, completed polygraph, committed no crimes, yet ICE detained him anyway, leaving his vehicle unsecured. Reports indicate DHS called it shocking that lawbreaker could be corrections officer, but sheriff confirmed there was no lawbreaking. Man had legal right to work. He was vetted. That contradiction reveals ICE might be operating based on assumptions about who looks illegal rather than actual evidence of violations. And there's guidance from police chiefs about reporting incidents. Sources suggest fact that O'Hara has to tell residents to call 911 if they see masked people who might be ICE, because they can't tell if it's legitimate enforcement or kidnapping reveals how far operations have deviated from professional standards. Reports indicate when federal agents operate in ways that look indistinguishable from criminal activity, when local police have to tell community they'll document whether encounters are legitimate enforcement, that's not restoring order. That might be creating atmosphere of fear and chaos where nobody knows who to trust, including law enforcement professionals themselves. Share this with everyone because there's data backing up concerns. Sources suggest Kyle Cheney at Politico tracked cases finding 2,300 instances since July alone where judges ruled ICE illegally detained someone. Reports indicate that's not activists making claims. That's federal judges systematically finding ICE operations violate law. When you combine illegal detentions documented by courts with complaints from sheriffs about Bush League tactics and warnings from police chiefs about civil rights violations, pattern becomes clear. This isn't professional law enforcement. This might be systematic abuse of power lacking basic competence and constitutional constraints. But let's talk about how even Trump's allies are turning against immigration strategy, because sources suggest this represents complete collapse of political support. On Fox News, conservative commentators now questioning whether operations are good for America. Reports indicate they're highlighting ICE agent on video threatening, "You raise your voice, I erase your voice." Agents trying to enter Ecuadorian embassy to round up people, which is illegal under international law. When told to back up by consulate worker, agent said, "If you touch me, I'll grab you." Fox News pointing out 2,300 cases where judges ruled ICE illegally detained someone. Think about what that means. Sources suggest Fox News viewers, Trump's most loyal base, are being told by their trusted outlet that ICE has gone too far and behavior needs to be reined in. Fox polls showing everyday Americans concluded operations are too aggressive. Reports indicate when you've lost Fox News on immigration enforcement, you've lost argument entirely. This was supposed to be Trump's winning issue. Federal agents restoring order, local authorities grateful for help, criminals being removed while law-abiding immigrants protected. But reality is opposite. Local law enforcement calling tactics unprofessional. Courts finding systematic illegal detentions. Even conservative media questioning strategy. And there's Trump's response, which sources suggest reveals panic. Reports indicate he's giving Kristi Noem cold shoulder over disaster. He's revamping entire immigration enforcement strategy. When your DHS secretary becomes liability because law enforcement professionals are publicly rebuking tactics, when even Fox News turns against operations, when sheriffs call your agents Bush League and chiefs warn their officers must intervene to stop federal abuse, that's not messaging problem you can spin away. That might be fundamental failure of strategy that's creating chaos rather than order and violating rights rather than protecting them. Make sure you're subscribed to John Brown Show because there's what happens next. Sources suggest Minnesota Governor and Attorney General calling for reductions in federal boots on ground as tensions mount. Reports indicate if you have sheriffs in Maine, not progressive legislators, saying same words about ICE conduct as officers across country, that's direct contradiction to administration's story. Trump's messaging always been that federal presence helps restore order. But law enforcement professionals who actually understand order are saying operations create chaos, violate rights, and demonstrate poor training. When those who swore oath to uphold law publicly oppose federal tactics, sources suggest Trump's entire law and order narrative collapses, revealing operations might be about cruelty and control rather than legitimate enforcement requiring accountability he refuses to provide. So here's what law enforcement rebellion reveals. Minneapolis police chief publicly warned officers they risk losing jobs if they don't intervene when ICE uses unlawful force. Maine sheriff called tactics Bush League policing after agents detained corrections officer who passed all background checks, then left his vehicle unsecured. Chiefs telling residents to call 911 if they see masked people who might be ICE because they look like kidnappers. Sources suggest complaints about civil rights violations are endless, with off-duty officers of color being detained and prevented from recording. Courts have found 2,300 illegal detentions since July. Even Fox News questioning whether strategy is good for America. Trump reportedly giving Noam cold shoulder and revamping enforcement approach. Question is whether law enforcement's professional assessment that operations are too aggressive, poorly trained, and unconstitutional forces any real accountability, or whether administration continues creating chaos claiming its order, while those who actually understand policing warn their officers must stop federal agents from violating rights they're sworn to protect. Stay tuned.